Hello and welcome back to episode 5, season 1 of the Purgatory Progressives podcast. You are joined by your host, Otto Maxwell, and my lovely, intelligent friend, Xavier Gillespie. Say good day, mate.
Thanks for having me, Otto.
Oh, that's the way. That's the way. So basically, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened this past week in politics, specifically Afghanistan. Now, you're across what's happening in Afghanistan, or would you like me to reiterate?
Yeah, maybe reiterate a bit. I've heard some stuff though.
So basically, the Taliban's back in action. Um, the US, Russia all pull out of Afghanistan. So you know what's happening now. They're getting fucking taken over by the Taliban because Al Qaeda isn't a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And they are doing some pretty horrific acts of human cruelty against women and children, which is not exactly the kindest thing that you can do. But yeah, what's your opinion on it?
Well, obviously it's not great, but I don't know what you could do because they've, well, the US were there for 20 years, right?
Yeah,
So eventually they were like, obviously they were going to have to leave at some point. Like
yeah.
it's 20 years of the wars is such a long time.
Yeah, definitely.
But
We aren't in the 1500s anymore. We can't have a 100-year long war. That's just not economically sustainable, you know? Um, so here's my big issue with the whole thing. People kept saying, like, while the US were in Afghanistan, oh yeah, pull the US out of Afghanistan. They're not benefiting Afghanistan in any way, shape, or form. So what happens? The US leave, Taliban takes over. Oh, can you guys come back now? Like, you told us to leave. What? It's like probably one of the most confusing things that like I can't really wrap my head around because the Afghanistan people really need like the US assistance, but the US left, and when everybody was giving them shit for being in Afghanistan, it's just a weird scenario. So what do you think about that?
yeah, well, it seemed a month ago or so, I heard a thing. Biden seemed pretty confident that the Afghanistan government would be able to maintain power in
Mm,
the capital. Like he said, there was something like 300,000 Afghan government troops to like the Taliban's 75,000.
yeah,
But now the the what's it called? Is it a president or prime minister? He's left the
the
country.
president, yeah.
The Yeah,
Well,
the government's gone to shit.
yeah, well, I mean, like the big problem with Afghanistan is that fundamentally Afghanistan isn't a country. It's like kind of just a loose area of where all those Afghani tribes, it's there's two countries in the world that can never ever ever be invaded, and that is Russia and Afghanistan. Russia because we saw it happen a couple times before, Hitler, Napoleon, but Afghanistan is just such an unforgiving terrain. No, but no, all the tribes always fight each other, but when there's an outside
Yeah,
force, they
sure,
all
yeah,
join
well,
together and they're like, yeah, oh shit, let's get these guys out of here. Now let's go back to killing each other. It's just such a turbulent, country that I don't know. And then you see a whole bunch of these people who really have no clue what's going on up in Afghanistan, have no idea what has happened in the past, who just, put on their Instagram story, oh, spread awareness about what's happening in Afghanistan, when really you don't give two shits about it. If you really cared, you'd be donating, in my opinion.
yeah.
Or better
Well,
yet, flying.
I don't think it's bad natured. It's somewhat confusing, I would say, because it's really hard to tell what's going to happen now that the Taliban's basically got full power of Afghanistan.
Yeah,
Like I
definitely.
couldn't.
Definitely. Well, I mean, it's kind of like another, remember that BLM thing that happened a while ago when
Yeah,
really like it started becoming a trend more than just like
yeah,
actually spreading awareness, and that's what I really have a problem with. We don't want to romanticize this conflict. We don't want to, like, when everybody put all the black squares on their Instagram, yeah, BLM, but you're not really doing
yeah,
anything to support them. You're not going out there speaking to the black people, seeing how they've been treated, or African American people, speaking how that even Aboriginal people. You're not going out there and talking to them, and that's what I have a really big problem with. I've got no problem with spreading awareness when you're doing all of that stuff and donating and actually helping the cause. But when you're just, putting a little Blackout Tuesday thing on your Instagram and acting like everything's fine in the world, it's really annoying, you know?
Yeah. Well, where's all that stuff now? Like you never hear about
Yeah, exactly. And
BLM anymore.
it's still a massive problem. The
Yeah.
youth incarceration rate for Aboriginals is something like 20 times higher than like us white folk to be put in prison. Like it's
Yeah.
absolutely outrageous, but nobody cares about it anymore because it isn't a trend anymore, you know?
And I think the black squares, it didn't help because it was like the hashtag was just so filled with black squares, like no one could find like where to actually help or donate because it was just full of
Yeah, it was just
people
full
just
of
posting black squares.
influencers, you know? Oh yeah, guys, let's the white people who have never really been exposed to a lower middle class or lower class, you know, upbringing. They've got no clue what it's like to live. Oh, spread awareness, guys! I know how bad it feels because somebody cut my spot in the queue once at Starbucks. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
Anyway,
I think it's hard to understand, especially
yeah.
when you're living in the northern beaches.
Yeah, it is pretty hard to understand depending on where you live, honestly. You would have if you haven't like put any thought into it or spent any time researching the ordeal, you wouldn't really know exactly what happens in rural Aboriginal communities because you haven't been exposed to it, which is fine, and that's okay. But you can't start parading around pretending that you know what it's like when you really haven't put any thought or care into it.
Yeah.
Anyway, is that all you have to say on that little subtopic?
Yeah. Still got to learn. Like I'm not 100% sure of like what's going on or what's going to happen in the future there.
Yeah.
Definitely
De-
turbulent times.
Definitely. Now, we were talking a little bit ago. Correct me if I'm wrong about Scott Morrison completely disregarding climate change, as the IPCC report, sorry, um, stated, and he's like, oh, you know what? Let's just gas-fired recovery plant. Like, what do
Yeah.
you think about how um, discussing our environment is being treated by Australian nationals or the Liberal Party?
Well, like I can definitely see where he's coming from because a lot of Australia's economy is run by coal, fossil fuels,
Yeah,
you know, but I think we're something like the we're definitely in the bottom for action against climate change.
yeah,
And we haven't put any like clear cut like when are we going to be net zero emissions by? I'm not 100% sure on that.
yeah,
Like other
exactly.
countries are definitely attacking it with more agency.
Yeah, yeah, like all the aquaponics farms and stuff, and like you've seen the vertical stacking in warehouses and stuff, and Morocco, for
Yeah.
example, has this massive solar plant that produces so much energy that they're exporting it to other countries, and that's a really big missed opportunity, and I can't really see why our government isn't putting their mind around it yet. We have a massive desert in the middle of our country that nobody lives in, that accumulates a whole bunch of UV
Yeah.
light, a whole bunch of sunlight. Make a solar plant. You're spending all this money on coal and stuff and mining, but we could be doing just the same. Battery, store it up, export it to the Pacific, maybe Pacific Island, or better yet, Asia. Massive market, especially China. China needs all that stuff. As much as I don't agree with Chinese, um,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I feel like it's easier to like stick with what's working now that has consequences you can't really see yet
yeah,
than to make the change now. And because there'll definitely be a bit of a, I don't know, economic downturn when we switch.
yeah. definitely. I mean, well, I know how much the Liberals like to pride themselves on being economic, masterpieces, but really, in the grand scheme of things, they're horrific economic managers. Like we've seen it with our COVID recession. We're in the highest debt level since World War Two. You know, and we're not participating in any major wars. There's been a pandemic that's wiped out all of our jobs, and like I get the whole point of saving the the hospital and health system, but I really don't understand like that all the why are you cutting off JobKeeper and JobSeeker? Why isn't there any discretionary spending like Kevin Rudd did in the global financial crisis? So have you got any
Yeah.
opinions on that?
Well, I don't know what to really think. We're kind of stuck really at the moment. Like we just kind of have to cross our fingers and wait for like a certain percentage of the population to get vaccinated, it feels like.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Definitely.
it's
Well, I
like,
mean, and all these protesters aren't doing much better. I know when Kai's on the show, he's like, "Oh yeah, freedom of speech protesting," and not to shit on Kai or anything, but look, like, sure, it's a human right. It isn't embedded into our constitution, but yeah, free speech is a thing in Australia. But you got to realize that
yeah,
you don't need when you're jeopardizing the lives of other people in your country. Fuck freedom of speech, bro. Who cares what you have to say? You're killing people, you know?
yeah. Well, look, I can understand why they're angry, but it's probably not the best way to go about it,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
definitely. It's look, I'm all for a good protest. I've said that many times before, but this is different. Like going out on the streets and protesting for Black Lives Matter, for environmental reforms and stuff. It's great. I'm all for it. But the second that you start jeopardizing other people's lives with the protests, and that's what I have a problem with. Like at first in America, I had no problem with the BLM with the BLM protests. The main problem that I had with the whole thing was the riots that ensued and the looting and stealing from small businesses and stuff.
Yeah.
You're not helping your cause, mate. Which is exactly the same thing with these freedom of speech protesters.
Well, I think something like that, when there's a lot of divide and it's almost like anarchy in the state, it's like obviously someone's going to kind of take advantage of that and
Definitely.
not use it for good.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. In times of crisis, people get extreme. We saw it in Nazi
Yeah,
Germany. Fall out of the Great Depression, people weren't thinking,
yeah,
"Oh yeah, let's go centrist." They're thinking you're either a communist or you're a Nazi or a fascist. One of those three, you know. And they're like, "Oh yeah, well. I care more about my right to freedom of speech, and I shouldn't have to wear a mask if I don't have to, you know. Like, think, mate.
yeah. Well, have you seen some of the stuff in the southern states? They're having another kind of COVID crisis, like Texas and Florida. Even though they've got high vaccination rates than us, people are just because the Delta's so infectious.
Yeah,
Just like,
yeah. It's like it's so um it's because all those southern states have kind of passed a law to prevent mask wearing, you know. So you don't need to wear a mask if you don't have to.
yeah,
It is not the most effective way of not getting COVID. The most effective way is social distancing and or not going outside, you know. But nobody can do
yeah,
that. So you wear a mask while you're out to prevent your spit, your saliva, your sneezes from your coughing from getting on people and infecting them. And all these people
yeah,
saying, "Oh, I don't want to wear a mask." Well, sorry, mate, you're killing people if you're not. Maybe not directly, but
yeah.
indirectly, it goes from you to some other guy to some other guy to some other guy. Before you know it, it's in the nursing home and it's killed your granddad.
Hmm. I think Well, we haven't heard that much, I guess, about like world news because we've kind of been focused on what's going on in
Yeah, on
Australia.
domestic issues. Yeah.
But I think there's definitely like China's seeing another kind of wave of COVID because one of the big vaccines, I'm not entirely sure what it's called,
Yeah.
but that they use in China, completely useless against Delta.
Yeah. Right. That's. It's just I cannot believe that we let it get to this point. And you know what? As Australia, we could have avoided this so easily if we just said no international flights. Come on, man. Our our industry, look, while it does benefit greatly from tourism and stuff, it can wait. It can wait. You know, because you're gonna be bleeding money out your ass if you allow travel back quicker than it should be. Like even with vaccination, once we get to 70%, no, don't travel. Don't travel until there is no COVID in Australia. You know, it's just one of those things that I have a problem
Yeah.
with.
Well, do you think there'll be like more protests, more extreme kind of behavior as because I don't think this lockdown is going to end on the 28th.
Oh, no
Like
way,
it's definitely going for longer.
no way. Yeah.
Do you
Um.
think people are just going to go more?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In times of crisis, people go very, very extreme. Very extreme in their views. Except now, instead of in Nazi Germany, where it was, oh yeah, you're authoritarian. We now have a whole different category to politics, which is libertarian. So I think we're going to see where you're centrally located, you're going to see a whole bunch of people down in the far far left authoritarian, far right um, libertarian, and far right authoritarian. You know, I don't think we're going to see too many centrist people anymore. Or if it
Well,
gets bad,
I think there will be, but you just won't hear about them. I guess
yeah, yeah.
tend to hear about the extremes more.
Yeah. I think that the media is also going to have a big, clasp on society and stuff, and they're going to be, oh yeah, look at all these extremists out here, and that's going to inspire more people, and everybody's going to get scared. And the last thing that you want is a scared society. So, you know, Uncle Rupert's got the world wrapped around his pinky yet again. How about you? What do you think about the extremes? Do you think people will get more extreme, or do you think I'm being overly dramatic with it?
Well, I think certainly people will get more kind of angry with the lockdowns as they progress, but I can't I can't see him stopping it now. Like it's like we're already in this situation. I think I think the police will definitely like I think there'll be more lockdown rules,
Yeah,
more
well,
extremes.
the police are ramping up, and look, as much as I want people to abide by the law, there is nothing more that I hate in this world than police overusing their power. And that's a big problem. It may not be a problem where we live because we're pretty upper middle class, but in Parramatta they had a tank rolling down the street. Now, what is that?
Really?
Yeah, it was like a full Tiananmen Square moment. When you have the
I
army
didn't hear
involved in
about that.
things, people get desperate. People do not feel safe when the army is in the street, and
Mm. Well,
they're handling it the
even
wrong
if
way.
people don't, yeah, well, it might, I don't know, might make people a bit more frightened, certainly,
Yeah,
with a bigger army.
yeah, but what do you think about people responding to a higher level of police and uh, the threat of martial law?
Mm, um, I don't know because I think there's going to be more protests, but there's definitely going to be a bigger crackdown on it. So I guess I would expect a more violent protest than we saw,
Yeah,
which isn't good, is
yeah,
it?
it's not good at all. The second you start, because next thing you know, these protests at the start. the first protest that happened, big joke, you know, like, kind of funny. Let's all get our mates together. But as there's more and more protests, the more and more extreme people will start, you know, feeding off these groups. Next thing you know, you got riots in the city, and that's the last thing that you want, especially when you're in a time of economic crisis. Like we saw it in Thailand, we saw it in Myanmar. You get the army involved in the street, people start fearing their lives, and next thing you know, everybody's rioting and chaos, anarchy.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I'd say Australia's definitely more stable than
More stable,
any
yeah.
of those
I
examples.
was using, yeah,
Like, I don't think it's going to be like super insane, like apocalyptic thing,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's my 2 cents.
Do you think there's going to be a change in, I guess, in power in politics because of all this, the handling of the
Um,
crisis, I guess?
I will be damned if Gladys Berejiklian's government gets voted in again. I think that is very, very, very unlikely to happen. I think Gladys has had a run. Same with Dan Andrews in Victoria. People are sick and tired of lockdowns, and they're going to blame it on the premier, even though
Yeah.
directly it ain't really their fault, but indirectly kinda, you know. So people will
Mm.
blame it on the first person in charge. Really, it's Scott Morrison. It's the federal government. And as much as I don't really like Gladys, she hasn't handled it particularly well. But you know, what can you do?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to like bag out Gladys, I guess.
Yeah,
Like
it's
you
easy and
definitely see it a lot, and I do agree with some of the stuff, but I don't
yeah,
know. She can't exactly change her ways that much now.
yeah, and I mean, she went on to Kiss FM. You know, Kyle and Jackie. I don't know. I don't watch them. I just saw the clip.
Yeah.
And she was parading around saying, "Oh, I don't get paid that much compared to all the other premiers in the state." Whilst looking at $400,000 a year. Like, are you kidding me? You're complaining about getting paid a couple thousand less than Dan Andrews and Palaszczuk, while
Yeah.
your nation,
Well,
while your state's in crisis. You know,
mm,
pseudo moralism. It's a big problem. You know, you got a whole lot of people who are so wrapped up in their own sense of who they are that they really couldn't really give a damn. It's just kind of like a trend to be, oh yeah, yeah, I agree. Pseudo moralistic
yeah.
values. Use that in your English essay.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything that you wanted to ask me that is possibly unrelated or still related? I don't really mind.
COVID.
COVID.
Well, I know you've been listening to a bit of the podcast, but
Me,
I know you
super fan.
definitely not very happy with this COVID thing. I don't know what you can do now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like accepting your fate, honestly. Anyway, enough with the
Mm.
politics. I wanted to talk a little bit about philosophical arguments, man, and what you would identify most with in philosophy. Have you got any favorite philosophers, by the way?
Um, Not really. I want to read a bit more, I guess, about it. I
Yeah,
guess if I had like a kind of philosophy that I've been, I guess, favorable or what I like, bit of Stoicism,
Stoicism.
Taoism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Stoicism is pretty good. I'm a big fan of absurdism. You know, so you know how you got
Yeah.
nihilism, and then absurdism is kind of like, yeah, we're all gonna die, but like, let's just make the best of it
Yeah.
while we're here. You know, like I
Yeah.
back in year 8, I was a full nihilist. I was like, you know what, I was the embodiment of afterlife with old mate Ricky Gervais, but you know, less funny.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like,
Well,
you know what, what's the point of living? And then I took a step back and I thought about, I'm like, hang on, everything dies. might as well just have fun while I'm here, you know?
Yeah, well, I don't think this might sound a bit weird, but like I don't think nihilism's like good for the soul, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's like even if you believe that stuff, it's better off to be wrong than nihilist.
yeah, exactly. It's kind of like it's like you know, what are you doing? But I'm also a really big fan of Stoicism. I think it's a really important,
Yeah,
maybe not your main one because that could like give you indifference and stuff and indifference, you know.
yeah,
But
that's my main gripe with it, I'd say.
yeah, you don't
That it kind of
you don't want to be so indifferent that you start blocking out everything. You know, you just got like that book that you
mm,
showed me, Mark Manson, The Subtle Art
yeah,
of Not Giving a Fuck. Um, he was saying pretty much stop giving a fuck. I'm just gonna say it like that. To things that really aren't that important in your life. You should only really properly truly care about the select things that are important. You know, and a lot of stoicism is
have you heard of
just not giving a fuck in general. Yeah,
you know Albert Camus?
yeah. I was gonna talk
The
about him. Pretty interesting guy.
Yeah, I've read one of his books. I had a bit of trouble with it because bit of a hard read. You know, it's called The Myth of Sisyphus,
Oh, Sisyphus. Yeah, it was punished by the god
where
to infinitely
yeah,
roll a boulder up a hill. I really like it.
yeah. Well, so Albert Camus did kind of he wrote a book about it. I guess it's kind of an essay where you know how he's a bit absurdist.
Yeah,
I don't want to butcher his kind of what's the word? His argument, but he basically concluded that we're kind of similar to Sisyphus in the way that life has no meaning, and that we have to imagine Sisyphus as someone who's happy,
yeah,
even though he's continually doing the same thing.
yeah.
I struggled with the
Sisyphus is pretty much a metaphorical embodiment
thought of
of
that for a bit.
Sisyphus is a metaphorical embodiment of struggle, and Sisyphus really is like
Futility.
futility, suffering, the struggle of life, you know, and that's something that everybody in life has to deal with. You know, you can't just waltz through life without struggle. Everybody has it, whether you like it or not. The poor, the rich, etc. Buddhism kind of thing, you know. But if you take a step back and learn to embrace that there is going to be a struggle, you'll live a more fulfilling life, in my opinion.
Yeah, or even somewhat find meaning in it.
Yeah, I think he said. Hang on, I've got it up here. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. You
Yeah.
know, and I think that's a great quote. One of my tops of all time. You know.
Put it on Pinterest.
Yeah. Put the you know cursive font on it. Live, love, laugh. No, I'm kidding. In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer, and that's true with everything. Yin and yang. Everything bad is a little bit of good in it.
Yeah.
Everything good has a little bit of bad in it. You just gotta deal with it sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there's another kind of what's the word? Psychoanalyst, not really a philosopher.
Yeah.
Carl Jung kind
Oh
of
yeah,
talked
I've heard of
about
him
that,
before.
the dark side of like yourself,
Yeah.
Star Wars type shit. But
Yeah, I've been getting into philosophy a lot because I think it's a lot of people like pretend like it's really not that important. Just like politics, a lot of people are really indifferent towards politics, and then you just gotta look. You may not do it to them, but one day they'll realize, or maybe they won't. One day they'll realize that really politics has a massive implication on your life, and same with philosophy.
yeah, well, I get how it sometimes feels a bit pretentious, I guess.
Yeah, I
Certainly.
know. Yeah, you can
The
get trapped.
pho- the philosophy major, you know.
Oh, no, no, nobody. How many? Well, if you think about it, how many philosophers have actually done a philosophy major? You know, they're all like
Mm.
psychologists, really, or political science, or
Yeah,
arts, something out there.
well, mm, mm. Well, I think it's just you don't have to like be an expert about it. Just, you know, have
Yeah,
a think about things.
yeah, exactly,
You
and
know, don't try and distract yourself with just dumb shit.
yeah. Well, I mean, our year eight English teacher said it best. You know,
Oh,
everybody's
don't.
gonna want to kill themselves at some point in their lives. Quote Mr. Selden. Love you, champion. But yeah, I think that it is really important to think about that. You know, like sure you're gonna feel depressed. You're gonna think, you know what? There's no point in living. I'm not going to accomplish anything. Nobody's going to remember me 50 years after I've died. What's the point? You know. But you really
Mm,
just have to take a step back and appreciate the subtleties of life. You can't just think all the time, oh damn, I want to kill myself. You know. And as sad as suicide is, I will never stop saying that it is a temporary solution to, I
yeah.
mean, a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's definitely not a temporary solution.
Well, what's it called? I guess that kind of people don't like when you say that as everything's meaningless. But then I guess how you know how you said you like absurdism. I guess it's like everything's meaningless. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah,
I can just
exactly.
fucking play around, you know.
Yeah, I can do whatever I want
None
to
of this really matters.
do.
We're only here for like a barely fraction of time, so
Yeah, exactly. Like, didn't some guy like drew up the entire history of Earth on like a little in like this time span of a day, midnight being where we are right now, and aren't we only alive for like the last 3 seconds? All of humanity is condensed into 3 seconds of a day. And your life is
yeah.
even less than that. Your life is what on average in Australia we're 80 years, depending on your lifestyle. Maybe even less if you get hit by a
Mm.
car tomorrow. You know.
Yeah. Well, I guess what's it called? It's pretty amazing how much we've progressed in such a small time.
Yeah, sure is. I mean, it's really for better or for worse, really, because there's a minority of people who think, oh wow, we're so much better in pre-agricultural times, just like the Unabomber. The Unabomber was like, you know, damn,
Yeah.
I hate infrastructure and
Well,
institutions of society.
I'd much rather be alive now because you'd literally, if you could get infected by basically anything.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
vaccines and probably a lot more predators.
yeah,
Like humans aren't very strong.
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's why I like absurdism a lot because you know I still believe that you know life doesn't really you can't really make much out of it at the end of it. You know, you're gonna die someday, and who knows? I could be taken out by a car tomorrow, like that poor year eight kid who you know stole a car and crashed it into a tree. 14 years old. How tragic, you know. But if I just like kind of imagine myself in that situation, and if I lived a life that had I pretty much accomplished absolutely nothing. Nobody's really going to remember me. And then you get a whole bunch of people. Oh my god, I miss you so much on their Snapchat story. A week later, nobody remembers you. You know, like
Yeah. Well, guess that's it.
guess that's it. Yeah, you know. But yeah, everybody does try and achieve happiness in their life, and look, it's a very hard place to reach because even when you are, you know, perceived happy, you think, oh damn, I could be happier. You know, like nobody
Yeah.
really truly
Well,
has full happy. You
I
know.
was listening to this Sam Harris. Do you know Sam Harris? I don't agree with everything he says, but
No, I don't know
I like
Sam
some
Harris.
of his more philosophical things. Yeah, he has a couple of books. He has one called Waking Up, but I like this quote where he's like, "You cannot become happy, you can only be happy," which
Yeah,
sounds a bit same, but it's like
yeah,
all you have is right now. It's like nothing can make you happy except yourself.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I couldn't agree more. You know,
Mm.
it's just how life is on occasion. But anyway, is there anything else you would like to speak about?
Not really.
Not
Didn't have
really.
much prepared.
Yeah, no. Well, we kind of got stitched up at the last second, so I hope you to those what one of 38 of my subscribers, or maybe even more. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed this little episode. We will definitely be having you on more, Xavier. I think you provide some very interesting
Yeah.
insights, and you're a great mediator, and you could be very used to, settle the heat between me, Xavier, and even me, Kai, and even HC. So yeah, thank you for all of you guys at home. Thank you very much for tuning in for this week's season 1, episode 5. Been 5 weeks. How cool is that? On my podcast.
Really?
Yeah, and I'll see you guys next week. Au revoir.